All right, good night, everyone. Welcome back to another class. So, we're continuing on chapter 7.3. We're still working on spreadsheets. We are looking at how we can develop a spreadsheet, how we can effectively use a spreadsheet. So, we're looking at using functions to do our calculations, built-in mathematical equations. We already looked at average, count A, count if, date, max, if, min, PMT, rank, and sum. Anyone has any questions on those functions before we continue? Before we move on to our next function, which is VLOOKUP? No questions? So I'm assuming you guys are good in those functions. All right. So, like the if function, we have some few complicated functions. For example, the if function is simple, but it can be very powerful, and it can get a bit tricky depending on how you design it. Because let me see if I can find an example. A Robert spreadsheet. Let me see if this one has an example. So this here is an example of a spreadsheet and of how a if function can get a bit complicated. So just focus on this part here that I've highlighted on the screen. You're going to notice that we have our equal if, and we have our tests, which is notice the bottom part here. The test is C3 greater than 30,000, that's our test. And then we have a true value, 5% is going to appear. But notice, in the false area, we have another if. So basically, if this first if is false, we can do another if and basically start the whole test over again. So we run another test now. So instead of looking if it is greater than 30,000, we now look for if it is greater than 10,000. And then we run another test on it and see if it is true. We put it at 3%. And we run a false, giving us 0%. Anybody think they understand what's going on here, or it looks too complicated?
Sorry, sir, it hurts to look at.
What was that, Akila?
It hurts to look at.
Hurts to look at? Okay.
Yes, you're right. I don't know what.
But you understand the first part of it, though, right?
Yes, sir.
That's the main part for you to understand. The first part of it. But it's like I told you guys in the last class. Whatever you put in this true part, and whatever, basically this entire part here, is actually in the false part. This entire part that I highlighted here, because remember, it's either a true or false. So this entire part here is actually in the false area. And because if the question is going to be false, now this question, then whatever here is going to be carried out. Eventually, over time, when you get more familiar with using the if function and getting more practice with it, you're going to see that you can do different functions using if. So you can make it simple, like the example that we have here that we looked at. A simple test is B8 greater than 10, and if it is true, we're going to see a yes, and if it is false, we're going to see a no. But the if function is very powerful. We can do a lot more with this if function. But just understanding that simple structure of it, that simple syntax of having a test, having a true value, and having a false value, that's the most important part for you to remember. Now, why I brought that up is because the VLOOKUP can be as tricky or even more tricky than the if function, and it is just as powerful as the if function. If you notice how long the syntax is, notice how long the syntax is for the VLOOKUP. It's about 6 lines, 5 lines and a little bit. 5 lines for the syntax alone. Now, as we go through the syntax, I want you to take note of some important parts of the syntax. It looks like a lot of information, but it's just them trying to over-explain in detail so that you understand what is the syntax. Now, to give you an idea of how a VLOOKUP function works, let me give you an idea. And then we're going to look at the syntax, because it's an important function for you to understand as to how it works. So I need you guys to pay attention. Pretend this spreadsheet here that we're about to create. Pretend that we're running a business. All of you, you're running a business, you're running a shop, and you're going to use a spreadsheet to record your items. So for example, we're gonna create a table. We're gonna say item and price, and we're gonna put, so we're gonna sell cheese sticks, $100, Bigfoot, 200, Dixie, 160, and so on. So these are some of our items that we're selling in this this store here, in our shop. Now, with this information that we're recording here, what other information might we want to add? Like for instance, if you're running a shop, what other information might we want to add?
So the amount?
Amount? Go back over.
So like your amount of each, like how much cheese sticks you have for sale on that shelf on that day, like the inventory for the day.
Good. How much you have in stock? Good. So maybe you have 40 packs of that. 40, we have 40 of everything. Good. And now, if you're gonna sell the item now, what's some information that you might need to sell the item? Bill. What's some information you would notice on a bill that gets calculated? Do you guys notice the VAT? Any discount? Good, the VAT. Shanika said the VAT. Discount. Maybe the total. Because remember, this is a single price. And we're going to want the total. So like if you bought 2 cheese stick, what's the grand total? So those are some additional information you might want on your bill. So what we could also use the spreadsheet for is to create an invoice. So like if the same item and the same price, so say for example cheese stick, and say the price is 160, then we can put in amount. So say the person bought 2 and we can create a simple formula. What formula would we create to calculate the total? What formula would you create to calculate the total? Come on, simple maths.
Sorry, what would be the question?
What formula would you create to calculate the total?
Oh my God. Sir, B2 times C2.
Anyone else agree or disagree? This shouldn't be that hard to figure out. You guys think this will work? The rest of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because
Yes, sir.
if you go to the shop and you get 2 cheese stick, you're gonna multiply that 2 by the amount you bought. So that's exactly what's happening here. So we get 320. So we just created a simple invoice here. Um, if the person bought 5 cheese stick, we put in 5 and we get 800. The person gotta pay 800 now. So what we're looking at so far is that we created a table that has the item, that has the price, has how much we have in stock. Well, ignore this column for now. We don't need that column. We just need was the item, was the price. And we don't want to mess with this table here because this is the original table. We don't want to create the invoice here and then we accidentally change the price. So we're going to go over to a new table, a new sheet, and create our invoice on the other sheet with the information. You guys following up to there?
Yes, sir.
All right. So remember we have a main table. So this is our main table. And this is like a secondary table for our calculations. Now notice something. If we have, notice what's going on here. Actually, I have cheese stick here. But anybody notice what's going on? I'm going between the 2 sheets. What's happening? Anybody notice anything with the cheese stick? Nobody see it? None of you notice the price difference?
Yes, sir. From guys, looking at our speak there were
Yeah, this one has 160 and my main table is $100. So I'm supposed to be selling at $100, but I'm overselling here. I'm overpricing my item, and then when people hear it's 160, they might go to another shop. So what we need now basically is something to link the 2 cells together that would link this cell here so that whatever price is in this cheese stick cell is going to appear in this cell here for this price. So that, say for instance, if I ever change this cheese stick price to 200, then wherever else I have cheese stick, it should change. You guys think that makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it should, because that's gonna help your business to run better. So that when you change it in one location, anywhere else you're using the price, it changes also. So that either you don't run your business as a loss, or you don't overprice the item and then somebody gone to another shop just because you're selling $20 or $40, $60 more. So the VLOOKUP formula, the function that we're looking at, is the function that helps us to link the cells together. So that if I ever change this price here to 300, like that, then when I go over to this sheet here, this 160 is supposed to change. And if for some reason I have it in other locations, it should change also. So that is the purpose of the VLOOKUP, to link cells together so that the data can basically match up. So let's look at the syntax and to see how we can use the VLOOKUP function. So the syntax is VLOOKUP equal VLOOKUP, value you want to look up. So the first part of the syntax is basically a value you want to look for. That's the first part of the syntax, something that you are looking for. So if we go back to our spreadsheets, let me close this here. If we go back to our spreadsheet, in this case here, we are looking for cheese stick. We are looking for cheese stick. We're in this invoice sheet and we're looking for cheese stick to match up. That's what we're looking for in this case here. You guys following?
Yes, sir.
So that's our
Yes, sir.
that's the first argument in the syntax. Now the second part of the syntax, the range of data where the value is located in the first column. So the second argument is the range of data for where this lookup value is located. So if we look back at our spreadsheet, this table here, the main table, is where the cheese stick is located. So that is going to be our range. So that we can say that, look, in this range here, you are going to find cheese stick, our lookup value. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Now notice,
Yes, sir.
now notice for that range, the lookup value has to be in the first column. Please remember that, that's very important. So however you create the range, say for example, this here is the range. The lookup value has to be in this first column here. So this is my range. Cheese stick is in the first column. Now say for instance I have a column before it. And if I had used this as my range, it will not work because cheese stick is now in the second column. It's no longer in the first column. So whatever you're looking for, whatever range it is looking at, the data must be in the first column. So the range could be this here. Remember, this is a range basically. Couple cells that you highlight or select and so on. That's a range. So whatever range you put to search the data for, the lookup value must always be in that first column. Please remember that. It's right here. It mentions it right here. It must be in the first column. Now, why it has to be in the first column is another point that you should remember about VLOOKUP. And that is VLOOKUP only looks to the right. Please take note of that. VLOOKUP only looks to the right. That is why in the first place, the lookup value needs to be in the first column. Because say for instance, this price here was actually on the left hand side of cheese stick. Now if you had created this as your range, and you tell it to look for cheese stick, it will never see the price because it is on the left hand side here. It can only see what is to the right. So it's only looking in this direction here. So that is why in the first place, you have to ensure that whatever you are, wherever you're looking, you have to make sure you highlight the entire range. You use the entire range. And whatever you're looking for must be in that first column. Are you guys following on all of that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Now the third part of the syntax. The third part states the column number relative to the first column. Notice first column appears here again. The column number relative to the first column containing the additional information you need. So just focus on column number. That's the third part of the syntax. So I'm going to put 3 there. So remember, it's basically 4 parts. 1, the lookup value. We call it the lookup value. 2, the range of data. And remember, additional information, it must be in the first column. And 3, basically the column number in that range that you want to link, that you want to bring over into the other cell. So going back to our example, if we highlight this as our range, so this table is our range, the first column is going to be item, but we want to bring over the price. So we need to tell it what is the column number we want to bring over, because remember we could have other data. For example, we had the stock amount earlier. So we earlier we had 40 for each stock. We have 40 cheese stick, 40 Bigfoot, and so on. And maybe we also have discounts. So maybe a 4% discount, 5% discount. Because remember, your table would have more data inside of it. So our range of information is growing. So if we use all of this information here in our range, the first column, remember the first column is what we're going to look for. So in the first column, we're going to look for cheese sticks. Now, the third syntax is the column number you want to bring over into the other location relative to that first column. So what that means, from that first column, start counting. Price is going to be column 2. Stock is going to be column 3. Discount is going to be column 4. So basically, if you want to link the price, all you need to do is put the number 2 because it is column 2. If you want to bring over the stock number, you put column 3. You put the number 3 because this is the third column. If you want a discount, you put number 4 because that is the fourth column. So it's that simple. The third syntax, it's basically what number of column you want to bring over. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. And the last part now is whether the list in the first column of the range is sorted or not. So basically, is the range sorted or not? That's all the last syntax is about. So it's not even necessary for you to state if it is sorted or not. But just if it is in fact sorted, you would need to say yes, it is sorted. But if it is not sorted, you can even leave it out. It doesn't matter because it's still going to work. So in this case here, I think it's a 0 or a 1 that would indicate this here. So that's basically a breakdown of the syntax. It has 4 parts. The first part is the lookup value. What are you looking for? It could be a word like cheese stick. It could be a number, the number two, anything you can look for. The second part of the syntax is the range. The range is where are you going to look for this data. And remember, it has to be the first column in that range. The third part of the syntax. From that first column, count after that first column and say which column number you want to bring over. Which column number do you want to link to the new location? Is it column 1? Actually, you can't link column 1. So is it column 2? Is it column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6? Whatever the number is, you basically put the number. And lastly, you say whether the data is sorted or not. So let's go through the paragraphs to get the other information, and then we are going to look at an example. So let's see. Tamika, can you read for us?
Yes, sir. Sir, VLOOKUP searches the first column in the table of data for a value. If the value is found, any other value in that row can be selected. The V in VLOOKUP represents looking vertically down the first column. An example of performing a lookup could be searching for grades on a list pinned on a notice board. The list is searched vertically until the correct ID number or name is located. Then the associated row is searched until the grade is found. The function in figure 7.28 is similar to those steps. The function the function equal VLOOKUP open bracket V8 class 2 false close bracket searches the first column in the range named class open bracket 4. Sure, I can't see anymore. The jazz class close bracket, and then searches across the row to column 2 for the day of the class. The list of classes is not sorted, so false is entered at the end of the function. The day returned is Saturday. The function equals VLOOKUP open bracket V8 class 3 false close bracket would return 10 a.m. As the time of the class. The column number is changed to return another set of data based on the class.
Good. So notice we have some additional information now. Now remember I mentioned that VLOOKUP searches the first column in the range. So we already know that. Now, when it finds that data, that word, that number in that first column, it searches the row of that data. So it only searches the row. So going back to our example, when it has found the word cheese stick, it can only look within this row. What it just highlighted there, it can only look within a row, not there. So it cannot look below, it cannot look above, because remember it was looking for this word cheese stick. So data related to this word cheese stick is going to be in the row, not below. This $200 you see in here is not for cheese stick. This 5% here, it is not for cheese stick. It is related to the Bigfoot. Dixie has the 6%. So we should know that is how tables work. The information in the row is related to each other. It's never anything below or above or so on. So that is why when you find the information in the first column, you look across in the row, and that information you pull over into the new location. So when it searches that first column, it has found that data, it will search the row for the other columns of data and then use that. So the V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. It is vertical lookup. So vertical is up and down, or basically top to bottom. So it's going to search that first column from top all the way going down to the bottom for that specific data, for that word, that number, whatever the case may be. So it's looking vertically, it's checking, going down, and when it has found that piece of data, it's going to go across now. It's going to start checking across for the information that it needs. That is how VLOOKUP searches for the data, for the information that it needs. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So let's look at this example that it has here. So we have a table, schedule for summer. We have the class column, we have the days column, we have the time. Now at the bottom, we want, at the bottom here, we want to extract. Notice we're not troubling the main table. We want to extract. We want to put it in another location. We want to know, for jazz, what day is jazz available? Is it Tuesday? Is it Wednesday? Is it Monday? What day is it available? So we can use a VLOOKUP to pull the information from the main table so that we can see it in another table, so that we don't have to mess around basically with the original table. So in this case, what they did, they use equal VLOOKUP, and their lookup value is cell B8. Now if you notice, they type the word here, jazz, because that's what they're looking for. So usually when you create your VLOOKUP, the lookup value, you're going to type it right next to it, like you see in this example here. So that's why the word jazz is right here. So cell B8 refers to this cell here. So it's looking for what is in the cell. Now, where is it going to look for? In the class range. So that's going to be this red part here. It was named class. And then the second column now, which is going to be days, is going to look at that column and bring over the value. So going it over again, it's going to look for jazz, the word jazz, because that's a lookup value, as you're seeing right here, B8. So it's going to look in here for jazz. It found jazz. Now it went, remember it's looking vertically, so it started from the top going down, it found jazz. Now when it has found jazz, it's going to look across, because remember it looks across in the row. So any other data it could actually extract to the new location. We just have to say, do you want column 2, do you want column 3, 4, 5, whatever the case may be. So in this case we want column 2. So notice they type 2. So that is why over here on the right hand side, you are seeing the word Sat or Saturday, because it is looking at the second column and bringing over the data for that second column. You guys think you have an idea of how the VLOOKUP works? Or a slight idea? Or an
Yes, sir.
idea?
I'm a bit confused about something, and I'll probably explain if I missed it. So we're searching for jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And in the formula, there's VLOOKUP V8 class 2 and then false.
Good.
How exactly does it know that we're looking for?
The word jazz.
Yes, sir.
Remember, it's just like if you're using a formula. If you're creating a formula, for example, B2 multiplied by C2, why doesn't it multiply B by C and 2 by 2? Why doesn't it do that?
Sir, because it's not data, it's the name of the cell.
Good. So it's not data, it's the name of a cell. That's very good. So it's not going to use the cell name to look for something. It's looking at what is inside of the cell. So it's the exact thing that is going on here right now. It is looking at what is inside of the cell. The cell is just being used as a container. So actually, what can happen now? Remember, we use cell names because we want automatic recalculation. Remember, that's always the case why we use cell names. So we can actually change this word jazz now to another name. We could change it to Latin because we use the cell. So instead of putting the word jazz inside here, which can work, we could have taken out B8 and put the word jazz, and it would have worked. But when you want to look for Latin now, you have to go into the function, delete jazz, and put in Latin. That is ineffective. The more effective method would be to use the cell, and then it's going to look at that cell, what is inside of it. Think you understand?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Alright, so let's look at one of my examples now, and I hope this can help the rest of you to understand. So here's what we want. This is our main table. Remember, this is our main table. We don't want to trouble it. We want to, if we want information from it, the best practice is to extract information from it. Don't go and mess around with this main table here, because this is what your business depending on. Extract the information from it. So somewhere else in the spreadsheet, we could be searching for the item. So for example, I'm going to type it across. Cheese or cheese stick. Should really name that cheese instead. Cheese sticks. And we're looking for the discount. So at the bottom here, I want to know what is the discount for cheese. Now obviously you can look at this table and say that the discount for cheese is 4%. But remember, if you're running a business, your table won't be this small. So using something like this here might be the most effective method to extract the information. So we want to extract that discount to know how much it is. Now, the first thing you need to do when you're using VLOOKUP is to name your range. That's something we're going to look at later on. Absolute and relative addressing, why we have to name our ranges. Why we can't actually put B1 till E4. Because remember, that's the range here. B1 to E4. But we can't actually use that B1 to E4. that there's a range. Notice it's highlighted in blue. We can't actually use that. We can't use it this way because it's not going to work properly. So the best thing to do is to name our range. Does anybody remember how to name the range? I saw Kilo's unmuted but didn't hear anything.
Sir, because I can't remember the exact name of the thing and I don't want to fuck myself, so I'll just be quiet and let someone who actually knows go ahead.
Shaniqua, how do we name a range? Nothing from Shaniqua. Sierra? Nothing. Tamika?
Sir, first you highlight the range.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, I'm gonna be honest, that's all I could remember.
Anybody else know what's the next step?
Sir, highlight the range. Click on, I believe it's called name box. Click on the name box and go without. And then
Good.
if you name it, press enter.
Very good. That is how you name a range. These are some simple things that you guys are supposed to be remembering. So that is how you name a range. That's how you name a cell. So we can name it. We can name it items. Yeah, we can name it items now. So I type in the word items and I press enter. So we have the name for our range. So we have everything now to create our VLOOKUP. So we're gonna say equal VLOOKUP. I'm gonna press tab to autocomplete. And now we're heading into the four parts of the syntax. Remember, the first part is the lookup value. Look, the actual word is at the bottom here. Lookup value. What are you looking for? Now remember, I said we can actually type in the word cheese stick. So we're gonna actually do that. Equal VLOOKUP. I think we're gonna need to put it in quotation marks. Let me try to see. Cheese sticks, comma. And the second argument is the range or the table array. Our range that we just created. So we just created items. So we're gonna type that in. Notice the range was highlighted, comma. Now the third syntax, notice COL index number, column index number. So if we want to bring down the discount, what column would that be?
Sir, 4.
4. Because item is going to be 1, price is going to be 2, stock 3, discount 4. Good. Now you might be thinking that simple counting, but you got to remember it starts from the range. So if the range had actually started from price, then discount would have been what?
Number 3, sir, column.
Right, that would have been number 3. So you gotta pay attention to the range that you create. Now the last part of the syntax is basically if it was sorted or not. So if it was sorted, you're gonna put true. And if it was not sorted, you're gonna put false. So we did not sort anything, so we're gonna put false. And
So when it says started, what does that mean exactly?
what is
What does it mean for a range to be sorted?
if just like how you sort data, you sort information alphabetically, numerically, and so on. That is sorting.
Okay, sir.
So, like how you would say, you would tell persons to line up alphabetically. based on the last name. That is an example of sorting there. There's an entire chapter about sorting, so we're gonna get more information on that later. But sorting, you guys already know what sorting is. Sorting is something being going in the order of alphabetical order or numerical order or so on. So I did not sort anything, so I'm gonna put false. And I'm gonna close my bracket now. I notice I have 0.04, so I'm gonna format it. I notice I have cheese sticks. So notice I brought down that value. So if for whatever reason this discount value is going to change, say it went up to 8%, notice it changed at the bottom here. So I don't have to go and change this discount here or in any other location. I don't need to do that. Once I link it together, basically, I can just change it in one location and it's going to change in all other locations. So if I had multiple invoices created or if I had other calculations going on, it can be used to update those calculations. So that's basically what VLOOKUP is used for. So notice when the main location changes, everywhere else that has that VLOOKUP is going to change. So let's further break down the VLOOKUP. So notice if I change the lookup value, this is a question Akila asked earlier. So notice I have cheese sticks here, but if I type in Dixie, nothing's gonna happen because I typed in the word cheese stick. Now I'm gonna delete that, and instead of typing in a word, because if I needed to change it to Dixie, I gotta keep doing that all the time. So the most effective method is to use a cell. So that's gonna be cell C7. So whatever is inside of this cell, cell C7, is gonna look for it inside of this range, this items range, bring over the fourth column so that we can get that data. So notice we have 6% here because we have Dixie. If I delete it, nothing, because nothing is in the cell. If I type Bigfoot, notice it changes to that. If I type cheese stick, I have 3%. If I type back Dixie, wrong place. Dixie, I have my 6% there. So you can automatically change the lookup value, and you got two benefits here. You can look for different items. If you ever want to look for a specific item, you can type in the name, or if it ever does update, it gets reflected also. Are you guys following?
Yes, sir.
What do you guys think about the function? Too complicated?
It's not so hard.
Very confusing.
Sir, it's confusing, but I see how it can be useful.
Once you understand the concept behind of it, how it is used, over time you're gonna get familiar with it. As you practice all of these functions, I'm hoping you guys are practicing also. Remember, if your computer doesn't have Microsoft Excel, or even if you don't have a computer, you can use Google Sheets on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer to do these same functions, to practice with these same functions. So please ensure you're practicing. There's even an entire exercise on them. So if you want to start practicing these exercises here, you can go ahead with that also, so that you can build your experience with those functions. All right, so let's go over the VLOOKUP once again. Does anyone have any questions on any part of it before we go over back the explanation again? parts that you think you were almost getting, but you didn't fully understand? All right. So let's go it over once again. So going back to the syntax, remember it has four parts. The lookup value, the first part. What are you looking for? What number are you looking for? What word are you looking for? Two, where are you looking for that number? Where are you looking for that word? That's going to be your range. Remember, it has to be the first column. Three, what column in line with that lookup value do you want to bring back? What column number? And then four, is it sorted or not? So remember, it searches the first column. When it has found that data, it's going to search the row for whatever column you indicate. And remember that V stands for vertical lookup. So going back to our example once again, we have equal VLOOKUP. Remember, we use cell names. That's the most effective method of creating functions and formula. We use cell names because if we ever want to change the value, we simply change it in the cell and not in the formula or not in the function. We don't want to change the function too much and then we basically mess it up. So you want to change what is inside of the cell. That is more effective. So that's why our lookup value is going to be a cell name. So we're going to look for what is inside of this cell. In this case, the word Bigfoot. Now, where are we looking for it? Well, we created a range, and notice it's highlighted on the screen here. In that range now, what column do you want to bring over to the new location? Any column number can work. So if I put the column 2, I gotta reformat it. So this is going to be price now. So notice price was brought down because I use column 2. And just stating true or false if the data was sorted or not. So we can use it in another sheet also. Remember we were trying to work on this invoice here. So I can actually create it over here also. So let me see if you guys can help me create this VLOOKUP. So it's going to be equal VLOOKUP. Equal VLOOKUP. What do you think should be my lookup value? What do you guys think? What should I look for? If I want a price for cheese stick, what should I look for?
Cheese stick.
I didn't hear that, Jahim. We're barely hearing you tonight, Jahim.
Cheese stick.
I heard, I heard cheese stick. Barely heard cheese stick. But are we going to type in cheese stick? What should we do? Ezelin? Ronlin, what should we do? Should we type in the word cheese stick?
Oh, no, sir.
Why not? What should we put?
Um, sir, probably put a cell name.
So, good. So, what is the cell name?
Sir, A2.
A2.
Cell
Very good.
A2.
So, that's going to be cell A2. Remember, we don't type the actual word or number in the cell, we type the cell name because that's more effective. Good. Cell A2. Now, where are we looking for cheese stick? Anyone, where are we looking for cheese stick?
Sir, in B2.
In B2,
Or on items.
in items. Remember,
Oh,
right, remember where you're looking is that range, that table that you create. So items is where you're going to look for it. Remember you're looking for it from that main table. So it's going to be items. Anybody remember the column number for price?
sir, 3.
3. It was actually 2. So column 2, good. And then we put false. Where should we put false or true? Let's try put true. Good. False is correct. Well, we're gonna put true, and notice what happens. Um, True. So let's put false now. Um, the word. Oh, this is a good example.
So you put items instead of item.
It's
Is that
items. This is correct.
okay?
Notice it's showing up at the bottom here. I'm gonna switch between the sheets. Let me see who figured out what happened. Anybody notice what happened? No one? Y'all bad at memory games. Nobody noticed the cheese stick? Y'all notice anything wrong with the cheese stick?
So the S.
Yeah, as simple as that is causing this error. It's not the same word. One is cheese sticks and one is cheese stick. It's not the same. So remember, it's gonna look for cheese stick. And when it looks over here, it's not gonna find cheese stick because it's cheese sticks. So simple mistakes like that can actually throw off your functions, your formulas. It has to be exactly what is in that column. So that's why it didn't bring over that 300. So notice we have 300. So we have 300 over here. So let's try to put true and see what happens. True. 300. Let me change the word to Dixie. Let me swap these two words. Sometimes what happens is that we're gonna put Dixie. So we have 200. Okay, it actually worked. Sometimes when you put true and the data is not sorted, it doesn't actually give you the right information. So that's why you have to be certain as to whether it is sorted or not. That's why in most cases, if you're not sure, the it's good to put false because false is going to work all the time. It's going to give you the right value. But nevertheless, the main things to remember we put a cell name because we look for what is inside of the cell. We don't type the exact name. We put where we are looking for the data and what column to bring over. You guys think you're getting it or are you still lost?
Getting it, sir.
I think I understand, yeah.
So, what do we need to fully understand? That more time to sleep on it?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I think I explained it enough because if I did another example, it's gonna be the same thing over and over. So I'm gonna give you guys some time to sleep on it, sleep on the information, so that let it sink in a bit. Because when we go through the exercise, we're gonna come across another one, how to use VLOOKUP again. So that is where we're gonna see if you guys remember how it functions. I think it's actually exercise 5. So all of these exercises, you guys have to work on them. Let's see, it's 8:39, so we're gonna move off of VLOOKUP. But before we move off, anyone has any questions before we move off?
No, sir.
All right. So what we're gonna look at next is relative and absolute addressing. Now, relative and absolute addressing has to do with how cell names change and how they don't change. For example, look at what happens when you type in A1, if I can get to type it in, and you bring it down. Notice what happens. You get A2. Didn't even need to tell it to autofill, to fill series. Because remember when you bring down 1, all the ones come down. And you need to tell it to fill series for it to increment. But if you saw what just happened, I brought down the A1 and because it is a cell, it automatically changed. Why do cells change automatically like this here? And then in some cases, you might not want it to change. Like for example, um, in this case here, if we were to type in the range of B1 to E6 or E4, we're gonna have that range there. It's gonna work. But if we were to bring it down, the range is going to shift. Notice the range shift because it's basically following what happened in this sheet here. So why does it change? Why don't we need to why we need to use cell ranges? Well, it all has to do with relative and absolute addressing. In some cases, we want cell names to change, and in some cases, we don't want them to change. So let's see what happens. Our next reader, Sierra, can you read for us?
Relative and absolute addressing. Copying formulae can be extremely useful. Consider the spreadsheet shown in figure 7.29. A, where a 5% discount is calculated on 3 days plans. As you create a spreadsheet to automatically work out the discount in each plan, you want to copy the formula to other cells and keep the discount as it is. The formula in cell C3 is B3 multiplied by B1. If cell C3 containing the formula is copied to cells C4 and C5, figure 7.29, B shows the resulting formulae. This adjustment of a formula when copied to other cells is an example of Excel using relative addressing. This assumption by Excel, in this case using the cell to the left and the 1, 2 above it each time, is useful sometimes but does not help if you need to refer to an exact location on the sheet each time. Such is your discount value in cell B1. This explains why the copied cells return an error or the result is incorrect.
Good. So if we look at the example here, they have a formula. Or let's create our own example before we look at that one. So when we have formulas, copying them can be useful when we have a formula. So if we use the example of our, we're going to use the example of our invoice. So we're going to add a few more items. So we're going to add, ignore the names for now. We're going to just put 400. Um, from that 400, 300, 5,000, 3,000, and so on. Now we can put in some amounts. Good. Now we're creating an invoice. So the calculation is going to be the same. B2 multiplied by C2. Now, would you guys go and type in each formula individually? Equal B3 multiplied by C3. Would you want to do that? Or would you want to copy the formula? Which would you want to do?
Sure, copy.
Yes, you would want to copy because you're looking for the more easier method. So what actually happens is that if we autofill, remember autofill is like copying. If you autofill, it copies the formula to the other cells. But remember at the beginning, I was actually using B3 and C3. But when I copied it, notice it changed. B4 and C4, B5 and C5, B6 and C6. It copied it and changed it to suit the row, to suit the table, to match the table, and carry out the correct calculation. That is called relative addressing. When you copy a formula, it changes relative to the location that it is moving to. So I'm going to turn on a view called the formula view, and if you want to see this view, it's the control key and the key above tab. Control and the key above tab, if you hold those two keys together, it shows you your formula. So notice I'm going to delete these two formula, and notice if I right click here and copy, and I go to the bottom here and I paste, notice the change. It changed based on the row. It's now in row 6. So it's using row 6, and based on how I moved it, it's changed to that new location. So in this case here, you want the formula to change. So if I copy it once again and I scroll down, notice my row numbers change. I'm at all the way at row 103. And if I actually paste here, I think this is the column. Yeah, if I paste here, all the way at 103, come on, I'll copy it again. So copy here, alright, I'm gonna paste it here. Notice it changed to that new location. That is called relative addressing. Notice if I go inside here, I shift it to the left. Notice what's gonna happen. I have an error over here and I have A because this C actually shifted 2 columns. So it has to move 2 columns. Remember, every time we came down, the number changed based on the rows that we came down. So because I changed the column now, the column has to shift. I changed 2 columns. I shifted from column D, column C is 1 column, column B is 2 column. So it moves relative to the location of where it was copied from. That's important to remember. It actually doesn't matter what is inside of the it actually doesn't matter what is the formula or what cell is used. What matters is that wherever you move, it moves based on that amount. So if you move 2 columns to the left, it's going to decrease by 2 columns. It went from C to A. If you move 46 rows down, it's going to add that 46 to the row number. If you move to the right, it is going to add that row on. So I'm going to copy that now. I'm going to move 2 rows to the right. Any guesses what row, what column now, column name is going to appear? Just the column. If I move 2 to the right, what columns are going to appear?
Sir E.
E, C, D, good. E, E and what? Remember we got 2 of them inside here. E and?
Sir and D.
Good, correct. So we're going to get D and E. Because remember, I shifted over 2 columns. So you don't have to actually remember how it shifts and do calculations like that. That's not the important part. It's just understanding that when you copy a formula and you paste it in another location, it adjusts to that new location. It's called relative addressing. It changes based on the new location. So our table was a perfect example of it, because in this case here, we want it to change because we want these numbers to be calculated. So if there was more numbers going down, then we could have easily brought down this formula and it would automatically do all the calculations for us and automatically do create all the formulas for us. That is called relative addressing. If you brought it out on the row, notice, remember, the row column numbers, column name is going to change. So it all depends upon how you move the formula. It changes in that direction. Actually, I think it's actually important to understand how the cells shift because they can bring a question like that in your exam. If a cell, if a formula was to move to the right, was to be copied to the right, two columns away, what might be the new formula based on relative addressing? So, like for instance, if I copy this B4 and C4 and I move it to this new location here, what would be the new formula? Let me see if anybody can do the calculation. I'm copying B4 and C4 to this new location here. What would be the new formula? I'm going to give you guys some time to think about it. Do your calculations. Sorry, I clicked away. Yeah, I think that's the location. What would be the new formula if I copied it here?
Sir, D8 times, no, sorry, C8
D8.
times D8, no,
Where's the confidence?
times E8.
Sir,
Go ahead.
So it's like D8 times E8.
D8 times what? I'm not hearing the last one clearly. E? Tamika, you were saying something?
yes, sir. Sir, she said E8.
Good. You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else agree? Anybody else disagree? Or the rest of you don't know? Should
Sir, agree.
Alright. So when we paste now, that was correct. D8 multiplied by E8. So remember, it is not it is what is inside of the cell, what you copied from inside of the cell, and how much it is moving to the new location. How much did it move to the right? How much did it move up or down? How much did it move to the left? And that will determine how much it shifts to give you your new formula or your new cell. So, um, good. So that there is relative addressing. Now, there are some cases whereby you do not want the cell to change. An example is, for instance, if a value is supposed to remain constant. Like, for example, if we are going to calculate VAT, does the VAT percentage change? Anybody knows? Does VAT change based on item?
So not a percentage, no.
No, it doesn't change. It's one fixed percentage. Well, it actually depends on the item. Some items might have a different percentage, but usually the same types of items would have the same type of VAT. Now, unlike amount, which can vary, because a person can buy 5 items, a person can buy 3, 2, 4, so you're gonna want those cells to change. But the VAT now, that's a different story. That's gonna be the same all the time. So if we want to calculate the VAT, so this is our VAT column, and we want to create a VAT formula. What would be the formula? If I want to calculate 14% of the total of Dixie, 1,000, what would be the formula? Just give me the formula, that's all I want. Ivandi? These are supposed to be some simple questions. What is the formula? Alright, so let me rephrase the question. If this was maths, how would you calculate 40% of that thousand? Give me the maths formula.
Start 40 over 100 times the total.
Good. So that's it in maths. Now, in Excel, you don't need to do that 40 over that 14 over 100 or whatever the case may be. You don't need to do that because we have 14% here. We actually have a percentage symbol. Actually, if you guys ever try it on your calculator, if you take 1,000 and you multiply it by 14 and you put that percentage sign behind it, you're going to get the calculation. You don't need to divide by 100 and do all of that. You guys, any of you ever try that?
No, sir.
Sir.
You should try it next time. 1,000 multiplied by 14, you put percentage, and you get your answer. You don't need to divide on the calculator and all of that. So, because this is already like programmed to indicate that 14% must be calculated of whatever value. So, the simple formula to calculate 40% is going to be to multiply the two together. So that's going to be this cell here multiplied by this cell here. What I was telling you guys is that on your calculator, you should have a percentage symbol on your calculator. So if you type in 1,000 and you multiply it, look at the top here, you multiply it by 14 and you put that percentage, notice you have your answer here. But this calculator didn't give you the right value. The one on my phone gave me the right value. Anybody has a calculator nearby? No one? Alright, so moving on. Yeah, the one on my phone gave me the right value. Yes. So this is a simple formula. Multiply D2 by G1 and we have come on. Yeah. D2 by G1, the 1,000 by the 40%, and we have our $140 as VAT. Now, if you try to copy it, it's not going to work because remember, it's going to change. Notice G2 went down, G3 went down, G4 went down, G5, and so on because of relative addressing. So we were actually doing a few absolute addressing for a while now. Anybody figure it out? What was used as the absolute addressing? No one? Well, the cell name, renaming the cell was actually what was used as the absolute addressing. So if I renamed this G1 as VAT, so notice I'm renaming the cell as VAT. In the formula now, instead of typing G1, I can type the word VAT. And when I press enter, and I bring down the formulas now, notice I have my correct calculation. And if I open that view of formulas, notice only this cell name changed with a D. D2, D3, D4, and the VAT remained the same. This is one method of using absolute addressing. Alright, so we're going to continue from here. We're going to review back relative and absolute addressing next week. So we're going to stop here for today because there's a little more information you need to know about absolute addressing, some other um, usefulness about it, and then we're gonna wrap up on manipulating rows and columns. What you guys can do, you can do these questions also for next week. So you don't have to do the exercises yet. Just do these questions as homework for next week. We're gonna review these next week. So next week's class is gonna be about finishing off relative and absolute addressing, looking at manipulating rows and columns, and looking at these questions for your homework. So in revision of what we looked at for today, we looked at the VLOOKUP formula. Remember, it has 4 arguments. I broke it down for you. 1, the lookup value. 2, the range, where it is located. And remember, it has to be the first column. 3, the column number after that first column, whether that be 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the last argument is whether the data is sorted or not. Remember how it works. It searches that first column vertically. It starts from the top going down. And when it has found that value or that data, it looks across in the row and brings back the column number that you chose. And then we looked at relative and absolute addressing. It has to do with copying formula, how they change. If it changes based on the location, that is relative addressing. If it doesn't change, it is absolute. The name actually indicates it. If something is absolute, it doesn't change. If something is relative, it does change. It is relative based on where it is located. Any questions before we close off?
No questions, sir.
Any questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, recommendations? Nothing? Alright, so we're going to close off here for tonight. If you guys don't have any questions, enjoy the rest of your night.